Welcome back to the channel. Guys, I have been wanting to have this conversation for a while, but all of my friends here apparently are too shy or I don't know, maybe I'm highly inappropriate, but okay, this is what we're gonna talk about today. Are you ready? I think this is a cultural thing because if you're American, there's an assumption. But all right, we're gonna talk about cut versus uncut peen. Yeah. All right. Subscribe to the channel, and yeah, let's talk a little bit about the eggplant. That's what we're gonna call it for sake of this video. Okay. Now I would say even before I moved to Europe, I dated European men. And now I don't mean European in the sense, you know, how some of us black folks just call white Americans European because, you know, for lack of better things to call them, I guess. But yeah, so I've dated Europeans from Europe when I was in the United States. So the first time I did see something that was uncut, I was in the US. But I had already, like the thing is, you don't even think about it. You grow up and, you know, the pictures you see, the diagrams you see, no one ever talks about foreskin in any sense of what it is. Like, you don't think about it. Most babies get circumcised before they are aware of the possibility to have foreskin, I guess. And it's just like something you do in most instances in the US. Now, it's just something most people do. It's a cultural kind of, I don't want to say trend, but I don't think people think about it. You know, they don't think about what it signifies, why it's significant to our culture. It's just something you do. Kind of like housekeeping, I guess, you know, for little boys. But that results in most girls, when they become sexually active, not really knowing or even thinking about an uncut unit or eggplant. So the thing is, it's definitely different in some ways. I guess the look and the shape of it in general is different. If you are just walking around, or you know, you see your partner unprepared for anything, it looks different than it does when it has been circumcised. So I think, you know, when you first see one, and I'm going to be honest with you, when I first saw the first oh my gosh, I can't even, now I'm shy. I can see why nobody wanted to do this video with me, right? But you know, actually, I think if I was talking to someone, it would come out easier. But the first time I saw one, the thing is, you don't know that it's uncut right away. If that eggplant has become fully grown and, you know, it comes out of its sleeve and you don't even know. You don't really pay attention unless you get very, very close and personal with it, or, you know, after things are all said and done and it retreats back into its little cave. But it's one of those things. It kind of like, I'm trying to like tell you, if you haven't seen one ever, think of kind of like an elephant trunk, right? So you see, like, because that's the thing, when it's cut, it always has that same shape and form, right? Like, you see the head and all of those kind of things, the end of the eggplant, you know, all of those things are there. You see the shape and form, regardless of its ability to grow or not. But when it has not been, that skin has not been removed, then, you know, once it goes back, assuming you're a grower, I mean, I guess even if you're a shower, oh my gosh, this This is going to be funny. Okay. So, generally the foreskin falls back and covers the ends of the eggplant. So it's all within. So it starts to look kind of like an elephant trunk if you think about it, because there's anyway. But when you kind of have never seen it before, it can be a little bit like, oh, why, what? Because you don't connect, you don't think about it, and it's like, oh, that's what it looks like with the, wow, okay, I see. And so, some people, especially I think us brown people, we think about cleanliness, we think about all of these things. And I think a lot of times when people have told me why they do it, it's more associated with hygiene than anything else, right? That it's more hygienic and blah, blah, blah. Now, perhaps that's true with or without the foreskin. It's able to be washed and cleansed, or it's not necessarily just about hygiene. I think that people are doing it more thoughtlessly now. It's just like something you do, although I do see more and more people questioning, should they do it, because there is pain associated with it, and it actually does apparently take away some sensation for men when they become older and actually become sexually active. Apparently there is some numbing that happens as well. And I wonder, honestly, and I haven't done any research, but considering the Christianity kind of tradition in the United States, I wonder if that also plays a part, especially like historically, why one might do it. Because I know growing up, they always wanted to try and calm people's natures. And since, the U.S. often kind of leans towards Puritanism, that definitely seems like it could potentially have played a part into reasoning behind why they might, cut things down there. But let's talk about looking at them, and is there a difference between feeling and sensation for women? Because that's really more important than anything else. So when you're manipulating it manually, for example, you might have to move things around to get into the cave. Do you understand? Can you get the visual of that? Pull the curtain down to get into the, into the cave. But once that, once the eggplant starts to grow and come into its own, the skin basically just goes away. It kind of just stretches back into the rest of the cave, and you don't see any sort of difference at all. So sensation and everything like that, once you get into things, is just as it would be with any other eggplant, assuming you're into that sort of thing. So when I first encountered it, guys, this was so funny, because like I said, I didn't know at first, and then like later, because the whole eggplant had been exposed, but later it was like, oh, what happened there? And it didn't like completely throw me off, but I had to really think about it and connect like the physiology of a man, of an eggplant, to not having been cut or shrunk down. So it was an interesting, I think, more mental, like, oh, okay, like the first time you see it, it's a little like, oh, then you become curious, right? Like you want to explore and move things around. At least I do. I am that type of person. When I see something that says, don't push this button, I have a really hard time not pushing that button. So I do think that thing was just like, I became more curious about that. And what you find actually in Europe is that most European eggplants have not been trimmed down. They are yeah, they're like, it's not a tradition here. So obviously there isn't much of a hygiene issue. Well, okay. So let me just say, I know there is a trend where you think Europeans and, like white people, I know a lot of black folks are like, they don't clean themselves well. Like, I know that, there's the whole celebrity thing who are non-bathers or whatever. I personally have not experienced those type of people in my life, thank goodness, because most of the people I know have been very hygienic. And yeah, so the non-bather trend is something I think maybe more American. I don't know why, but I think that might just be for y'all. I think it's one of those things where when you start thinking about culturally why they do it, what could be behind it, there's not the same ideologies, I think, throughout Europe about cut versus uncut. I think most European women have seen primarily uncut eggplant and would only see a cut one probably if they went the American route. And I mean, my experience outside of like those two spaces are, pretty limited. I always just say, let's see, yeah. And anyway, so most European women would expect actually an uncut eggplant. And yeah, so it would probably be opposite culture shock for them to see how many American men are cut and what that looks like. I don't know, and like that's the thing, I would love to have this conversation with someone to see if they have preference. When I was dating or going out or whatever, it's not actually something I thought about after that first time of being introduced to an uncut eggplant. I never thought about it again. I was like, okay, been there, done that. And then I just realized it wasn't a one-off and that most European men have the full eggplant versus, a trimmed one. So it's just a different culture. And I don't think that most people here even consider cutting their children unless there is some medical reason behind it. And I know the fact that, this is a big Catholic countries, kind of takes out some of the religious aspects to it for me. I know like that, associated with Christianity. I know there's other religions that have a religious ritual with that, but associated with Christianity, I think that removes the idea that it's something religious, since most Americans who do it would consider themselves Christian. So that has nothing to do with it. And there's the hygiene aspect, which isn't really a thing. I don't think, from the experience, obviously, of many countries having, full eggplants. So I think there's a different reason behind it. And I mean, maybe you guys can educate me, but I would say from the perspective of getting down, it's kind of like potato. There is not much of a difference between an uncut versus a cut eggplant from what I can see. Once it's fully grown, it's fully grown, and you can't tell that there's anything extra there. But apparently it helps the guy with their overall experience. Now, you know what? I will say that maybe there's an extra texture to the to the eggplants that have not been trimmed. There might be a little extra texture there depending on the moments, but outside of that, it just depends on the motion in the ocean and if the boat knows how to float. So the rest of it is just physical. So y'all, this conversation, I try to keep it short and simple because maybe one of my girlfriends will eventually have a chat with me about this. They can get over their shyness since I did it all by myself. But next time we have this discussion, we're going to go more in depth, and I'm going to pull one of my friends into this, and hopefully we can talk a little comparison, because maybe other people feel differently. Maybe you guys feel differently. Tell me about it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, and yeah, ciao for now.